In the golden sands of ancient Arabia, where power belonged to the wealthy and cruelty ruled over the weak, a man was born who would change the meaning of freedom forever. His name was Bilal ibn Rabah, a name that still echoes through the minarets of every mosque in the world. Bilal was born in Mecca, long before Islam was revealed. His father, Rabah, and his mother, Hamama, were slaves of Abyssinian origin. From birth, Bilal knew hardship, but his heart was filled with honesty, patience, and strength. Though he lived as a slave under the cruel and arrogant Umayyah ibn Khalaf, his soul was free, untouched by the idols that surrounded Mecca, when the message of Islam began to spread through the words of the Prophet Muhammad. Bilal heard about this new faith that preached something no one in Mecca had ever dared to say, that all humans are equal, and there is only one God. Bilal's heart recognized the truth. Without hesitation, he accepted Islam and declared, "There is no God but Allah." When his master found out, rage consumed him. How could a slave reject the gods of Quraysh? How could he follow Muhammad? Bilal was dragged into the burning desert. The hot sand scorched his back, a heavy stone was placed on his chest, and he was beaten again and again. But his lips refused to give up the truth. Through the pain, through the blood, through the heat of the sun, Bilal kept saying one word again and again. Ahad, Ahad. One, only one. That single word shook the pride of Mecca. The idols of Quraysh trembled before the strength of one slave who refused to bow to anyone but Allah. Day after day, they tortured him, but Bilal's heart only grew stronger. His faith burned brighter than the sun that tortured his body. People who saw him began to whisper, "There must be something divine in the strength of this man." One day, Abu Bakr, the closest companion of the Prophet, saw Bilal suffering under the blazing sun. Abu Bakr's heart couldn't bear it. He went to Umayyah and said, "Sell him to me." Umayyah laughed cruelly and said, "Take him for 7 ounces of gold. He's worthless anyway." Without hesitation, Abu Bakr paid the price and freed Bilal. When the Prophet heard the news, he smiled and said, "Abu Bakr, you are the one who has freed Bilal for the sake of Allah." And just like that, Bilal, once a slave of men, became a servant of Allah, free forever. As Islam grew stronger, the Prophet decided that the believers should be called to prayer. He asked his companions who would stand to give the call. Among the great warriors and noble men, the Prophet chose Bilal. "Bilal," he said, "your voice is pure and beautiful. Stand and call to prayer." Bilal climbed to a high place and raised his voice. "Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar." His powerful voice echoed through Medina for the first time, carrying the message of faith to every heart. From that day on, Bilal became the first Muazzin of Islam, the caller to prayer. His voice became the sound of faith itself. Bilal was deeply devoted to the Prophet Muhammad. He never left his side, in battles, in hardship, in prayer. He fought bravely in Badr, Uhud, and many other battles. Not for glory, not for wealth, but for Allah and His Messenger. The Prophet once said to him, "Bilal, I heard your footsteps in paradise before me. What greater honor could there be?" The footsteps of a freed slave echoing in the gardens of Jannah. Years passed, and the Muslims returned to Mecca, the very city that had once tortured Bilal. When the Prophet entered the Kaaba and destroyed the idols, he turned to Bilal and said, "Bilal, climb to the roof of the Kaaba and call the Adhan." The same voice that once cried Ahad Ahad under pain now rose above the Kaaba, proclaiming the oneness of Allah for all to hear. The city fell silent. Even those who once persecuted him stood with tears in their eyes. The slave they once beat was now honored before all of Mecca. But time went on, and the day came that broke every heart, the passing of the Prophet Muhammad. Bilal could not bear the loss. Every time he tried to call the Adhan and reached the words, "Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasul Allah," his voice broke and tears flowed. He went to Abu Bakr and said, "O Abu Bakr, allow me to leave Medina. I can no longer live where I no longer see the Messenger of Allah." Abu Bakr, with a heavy heart, agreed. Bilal left for Syria, carrying his memories of the Prophet deep in his heart. Years passed. One night, Bilal had a dream. In that dream, he saw the Prophet smiling and saying gently, "O Bilal, why have you not visited us?" Bilal woke in tears, overwhelmed with love and longing. He immediately set out for Medina. When the people of Medina heard that Bilal had returned, they ran to greet him. Men, women, and children came out crying with joy. They begged him, Bilal, please give us one last adhan. He hesitated, but then climbed to the same spot he once stood. He raised his voice once more. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. As his adhan filled the air, Medina trembled. People poured into the streets weeping because it felt as if the Prophet had returned. It was the last adhan Bilal ever gave. Not long after, in Damascus, Bilal fell ill. As he lay on his deathbed, his wife wept and said, "Oh, what sorrow!" But Bilal smiled and replied, "No, say instead, what joy! Tomorrow I will meet my beloved, Muhammad and his companions." And with those final words, Bilal ibn Rabah returned to his Lord. He left behind not wealth, not kingdoms, but something far greater, faith, courage, and a voice that still calls millions to praise every single day. From the chains of slavery to the heights of honor, his life reminds us that true freedom is not in the body, but in the soul that bows only to Allah. Centuries have passed, but his adhan still echoes, in every mosque, in every heart, in every believer who hears the words, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. May Allah be pleased with Hazrat Bilal, and may we learn from his strength, his patience, and his unshakable faith. Ameen.